have a grandmother?
I do have a grandmother.
Would you put her in a house with somebody else that you don't know, that nobody knows in your family? Tell me that. Would you do that?
I wouldn't want to, and my dad wouldn't allow it to happen because he's wealthy enough.
Yes.
This man is like a parody. He is a parody of every single revolting conservative you've ever met in your life.
Charles, I wonder what you make of the Conservatives' reaction to this. This is Richard Fuller, who's the chairman of the Conservative Party. I can honestly say I had never heard of Richard Fuller before he became chairman of the Conservative Party. Just 2 months in, and Keir Starmer has taken winter fuel payments of 10 million pensioners, showered billions of taxpayers' money, the Conservatives say, on his union paymasters, and is now engulfed in a cronyism scandal after parachuting donors and supporters into top taxpayer-funded jobs. The soft-touch Labour Chancellor is squandering money whilst fabricating a financial black hole in an attempt to con the public into accepting tax rises and literally leaving pensioners out in the cold. What do you make of that?
I think it's a great shame that the party of sound public finances is attacking the Labour Party for making the tough decisions over winter fuel allowance and other things.
This idea that somehow fiscal responsibility means not spending any money. Yeah, you know what would have been really fiscally responsible? Letting a bunch of old age pensioners die because they don't have enough money to heat their home. Because there'll be plenty of people who are just over the line for pension credit who will now not be getting the winter fuel payment, and that will lead them to not have a warm enough house in the winter. And that's what happens to old people when they don't have a warm enough house in the winter. It's as simple as that. That is not sound finances. That is not a sound financial decision to take that away. Sound financial management is when you spend money on the right things. Spending no money is how you end up with no assets.
It's not the right thing to do. It's very, very clearly attempting to score cheap points over the Labour Party as opposed to putting forward the national interest, which is what a proper party would be doing. They should be backing the measures that Labour is making that are tough.
You believe the tough measures, as you call them, and getting rid of winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners is the right thing to do?
Absolutely. It's
Why?
the best thing they have done. Because people do not need this money. They're not entitled
I tell you something, there are plenty of pensioners who've contacted me who do need the money.
Yeah, well, I don't believe them.
You don't believe them?
I don't believe them. So
this is conservatism writ large. I don't think that you need any help, and if you think that you do, you're lying. This is what their justification was for enacting the giant slashing of the welfare budget throughout the entirety of the Osborne austerity period, again, which led to 330,000 excess deaths. That is a gigantic stain on their record, by all means. And that same vein is being used by this person here from Conservative Home and the Mises Institute as a justification as to why we should take money away from pensioners. And if they are told that what they are doing is harmful, what's their response? Is it, oh, well, maybe I should re-look at what I have intuited my position as? No, it's, nuh-uh. You're wrong. You're lying. You can't possibly need this money. I don't believe you. Yet what do we have as a result of last time a government tried to do this when in government by slashing welfare payments? 330,000 excess deaths.
If you look at the bottom quintile of pensioners, they spend 17.8% of their income on hotels, restaurants, cigarettes and alcohol. That's the equivalent of £2,100 for them. If you take away the £200 winter fuel allowance from those people, they would only have to cut that expenditure, which could only be described as leisure expenditure, by 10%. Now, when one of your texters talks about heating.
And again, this is just like what they say with young people. Oh, well, they can't afford a house because they're spending their money on Netflix and they're not making a packed lunch and they get avocado toast. Just the same as saying all of these pensioners, the bottom quintile, actually, they're not in need of help whatsoever at all. They're too busy spending their money on eating at restaurants and enjoying their lives. I can't claim the veracity of these statements. And again, this is 20% and then a percentage of those people, as if all of the bottom quintile, all of them are being reckless with their finances and therefore some of them fall through the cracks. Well, that's good enough as a reason to punish those who aren't being fiscally prudent in their own time.
And for those tiny minorities...
there are a number of people who find that an outrageous comment.
Fine.
Michael?
Well, it's an out-of-touch ivory tower response, if you don't mind me saying so, Charles. I mean, just to say, pensioners have got lots of leisure interests, they go on holiday, they drink alcohol and so on. That may be true in some cases, but there are many pensioners who are so poor they can only heat one room. They frequently really live in fear of going into debt because, of course, if you're retired, bad, the prospects of you paying off debt is much harder. And so there really is a genuine hardship. And we're not just talking about the group of people for whom the winter fuel payments will carry on. So I think a little bit more sympathy on your part.
But I'm talking about the bottom 20% of pensioners. And it should be remembered that the very, very, very poorest pensioners, the 1 million pensioners who still receive pension credit, will carry on receiving the winter fuel allowance.
But essentially you're saying, but Charles, you're saying to pensioners who enjoy a fag or a drink, give that up if you can't afford things. I mean, are you honestly saying...
We have the worst state pension in Europe. Plenty of people who are not going to get pension credit, who are just above the threshold for it, who will need the winter fuel payment to be able to have a properly heated home, who will now not get it. And also those who don't claim pension credit even though they qualify for it, who now won't begin the winter fuel payment. So they're also going to be in the sharp end of this too. And then plenty of other people who just fall through the cracks. Regardless, I will say it is pretty hypocritical from a bunch of right-wing commentators getting outraged, legitimately, I think correctly outraged at this idea that all pensioners have it good and anybody who's above the threshold for pension credit doesn't actually need this winter fuel payment. This is an excellent welfare cut from the government. That opinion, getting outraged at that opinion correctly in my mind. Yet do you think he would get just as outraged with PIP or with Motability or with job seekers allowance or any other kind of welfare payment? It's weird how it's always a different rule for, I don't know, the Conservative Party's voting base, when of course I believe in having good welfare payments to old and young people, because that would be an ethical and also would be a consistent position.
Saying people should stop smoking. I think everybody should. So they should give up any luxury they have. Anything,
no, I'm
a cigarette
not saying
that gets them through the day.
I'm saying that they should reduce their leisure expenditure by 10%. In fact, less than 10%. Reduce it down from £2,100 to £1,900. That's not much to ask. People are not entitled to force other people to give up the fruits of their labour so they can go on holiday or they can have a pint of beer down the pub. People should stand on their own 2 feet, and this is part of making people stand on their own 2 feet. Ideally, we shouldn't even have a state pension system. Everybody should have a private pension.
Sorry, you shouldn't have a...
What? We should get rid of the state pension and have only private pensions? The reactions here from his co-panelists say it all, really. Not only should pensioners not have access to the winter fuel allowance, apart from a tiny minority who qualify for pension credit, who also actually claim pension credit as well. On top of that, no state pension whatsoever. If you've lived your life in a job where you don't get a good enough private pension, tough shit. We already have the worst state pension in Europe, and his position is not, well, how about we make life a little bit better for the elderly by making sure our state pension is a little bit more lucrative? No, get rid of the state pension. Libertarians, right? Am I right, chat?
A state pension system?
No, not
really?
at all. People should support themselves on their own 2 feet with a private pension.
What about disabled people? Should they just fend for themselves?
Ideally, charity should support those people, or they...
Literally, it's just like, what about the state protecting the disabled? No! And if people don't donate to charity, then the disabled people are SOL.
Are you saying, sorry, Charles, are you saying there shouldn't be state benefits for people who are disabled?
Yes.
Why? What is your possible logic for that? People who can't quite literally stand on their own 2 feet. People who, through no fault of their own, are in a situation where they need a handout from the state to survive.
People are entitled to their private property, to the fruits of their labour, and it is wrong for the state to forcefully...
Is this man a Rothbardian? Is that what I'm coming up against? We talk about a Rothbardian here. This property rights fundamentalism that he's got going on here. Again, equating the idea that people's remuneration financially is somehow a one-to-one representation of how much work they've done or their usefulness to society. Money is not the resources that are created. It is not a measure of someone's worth to society. All it is a measure of how we distribute goods and services in society. It's a measure of where resources get distributed. And the market fundamentalist logic over this is just, well, however you provide to the market should be how you get judged in terms of what resources you have access to. Us, here on the left, who think that the state should be active in shaping the distribution, say, no, maybe this needs some redistribution to make it a little bit more even, because the market can sometimes overvalue people's contributions in terms of what they really are to society, when the broader utility of sharing this out more equitably leads to better outcomes and happiness for everybody.
Just as we do not accept that charities such as Oxfam can thieve from individuals to support starving Africans in that continent, neither should we accept that private individuals should have their private property stolen from them by the state to support people such as disabled people.
I want to take a call from Ruth in Bedford, who I think has perhaps taken exception to what Charles has said. Ruth, you're very welcome to the programme. You're on with me and with Michael Crick and Charles Amos as well. What would you like to say today?
I'd like to say about the winter allowance that not all pensioners are rolling around the countryside and on planes going abroad and spending money in hotels. I have just the basic pension. I have to pay a bit of my rent because my rent isn't covered fully by the housing benefit, and I am desperate. I've had a 23% rise in my rent this year. How this man can sit there and say that most of the pensioners don't need this, I can't understand it, because there's 10 million of us who are awful lot of people in my situation who have nothing, and we're living on £228 a week, and I challenge him to do that, especially when you've got to pay rent out of it as well.
And it's important to understand that obviously young people get hit really hard by private rent, but those who aren't working are some of the people who are the hardest by the fact that the rental market in this country is screwed up to high heaven. So people who are on job seekers as welfare, people who are on disability as welfare, or people who are on the state pension as welfare. These people have it really tough when you have to start paying the exorbitant rents. Those who fell through the cracks during the housing boom during the 90s and the 80s, who never became homeowners and are renting for their whole adult life. When they get into retirement and they're still renting, the state pension is garbage. Whereas there are people out there not paying anything at all on mortgages they've paid off. There's a giant gap that you get in terms of people who probably don't even qualify for pension credit, but who how their differences in expenditure is vast because of one paying rent and the other not.
You've got the increase in the in all the bills and everything. Yeah. Everything's just going up, and you can't get pension credit if you get the full pension.
Charles, what would you say to her?
£228 a week.
I would say this. If you look at the bottom 20% of pensioners, they spend 17.8%.
I don't think she cares about statistics. I think she cares about how she lives.
Does the caller live in a flat, or does she live in a room in somebody's house?
It makes absolutely no difference where I live.
It does, because if you live in a flat, you could live in a room in somebody else's house, as I do.
Thank you. At my age.
What the hell? His argument is, well, I understand that where you're living might not be particularly optimal given your financial circumstances. Have you considered moving in with a mate or living in an HMO as an old person rather than having literally any autonomy whatsoever? It's clear that you're living above your means by having a flat to yourself. Unreal.
Why should other people subsidise you to live in a flat through their labour?
Hold on, let her speak.
You listen to me. When you've had a family and lived independently for all those years, why should I go and live in a one room with somebody's family just because I haven't got enough to pay my electric bill?
Because it's not right.
Why should I?
I'll tell you why. Because it's not right that other people should be forced to give up their income to subsidise you to live in a flat or an apartment where you don't have to live with other people. It's all very well...
Excuse me, just wait a minute, wait there. Do you have a grandmother?
I do have a grandmother.
Would you put her in a house with somebody else that you don't know, that nobody knows in your family? Would you put her in a one room to share? Tell me that. Would you do that?
I wouldn't want to, and my dad wouldn't allow it to happen because he's wealthy.
Well, yes, okay.
Jesus, this man is like a parody. He is a parody of every single revolting conservative person that you've ever met in your life. Just going like, oh, well, I don't have to care because my dad's rich. How dare we give pensioners a very small amount of winter fuel payments so that they can ensure that they at least keep some of their independence before they die? But no, I'm all right, Jack. My dad's rich. That's it. Born into wealth and privilege, cannot bother empathising with anybody else. Sorry you're in a shit situation, but I'm rich and you're poor, so jog on. Why don't poor people just buy more money? Just don't be poor. Have you tried not being poor? This is his gambit as well. This wasn't information offered up by the caller. He voluntarily went to the caller, well, are you living in a flat or are you living in a house share? Like a student?
Okay, because your dad's got money, right?
Yes, because my dad has money. If he has money, he can do more stuff than you, who doesn't have as much money.
Exactly. So why should I be punished? Why
You're
should
not being
I be
punished. If you don't have money, you can't have as much stuff. It's as simple as that. And you shouldn't expect
Yes, it
other
is,
people to
yes.
pay
But
taxes
I've worked.
to support.
And this is why I hate market logic. It's literally just, you don't deserve this because you've not interacted with the market in such a way as to have enough of the currency to be able to justify subsistence level of existence. I just despise this kind of stuff. But again, you have to be a sociopath to be a Rothbardian. Like, for people who don't know, Murray Rothbard is like the ultimate ANCAP.
I have worked all my life. I've brought out 5 children, mostly on my own, and they all work. Now, this isn't right that
Yeah, but did you work as a management consultant for KPMG? I think not. Checkmate. You must have done a menial job for the plebs. Therefore, dignity in old age should be beyond you. This is genuinely how these people think.
I am not being able to pay my electric bill. It's just not right that I should be put into a room sharing in a house with other people at my age. It isn't fair.
Well, I would disagree entirely. Maybe if you didn't have 5 children and you had fewer children, you could have saved a bit more and you wouldn't end up in that situation.
My 5 children are all looking after everybody else by paying tax because they work hard. One is actually a train driver. So, you know, I'd just give up.
Charles, I think a lot of people will find what you're saying quite cruel.
Fine.
Have to be a sociopath. People like outraged at you, everybody around you going, you sound like a bit of a dickhead, mate. And your response is, well, if you say I'm a dickhead, I guess I must be a dickhead then. The rest of us, we have this filter system where we'll say, well, maybe I won't say that. Might sound a bit nasty. And yet the libertarian brain is so sociopathic, you just cannot possibly engage in any amount of empathy. You are an empathy vacuum to be these Rothbardian libertarians.
Do you not have compassion for people like Ruth?
These people who are moaning about the winter fuel allowance being cut do not need the money. They can cut their leisure expenditure by 10%. And when they pretend that there's a choice between heating and eating, they're making things up.
Okay, just a final word now to Charles.
My final word to Charles is, I hope when he gets to my age, he is not sitting in a 1-bedroom room.
Okay, well, listen.
I hope he ends up being Ayn Rand and claiming state benefits despite spending her life railing against them, and he ends up being a massive, gigantic hypocrite. Honestly, I hope that he just ends up changing his mind and becoming a better person. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p. So be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.